So I said I would let you in on the secret of the how to get out of the left-hand column, right? So let's go back to the deck a little bit. So here's the thing. I know this is a creepy picture, but I love this quote. I have little morally persuasive power with people who can feel my underlying contempt. See, the contempt is the problem. I could teach you all the nice words in the world. And if you feel underlying contempt for the person when you're using all those nice words, it's not going to matter, right? This is one of the things we know is that people are fairly sensitive to this stuff. So the left-hand column is the problem is the toxicity. And one of the things we spent a lot of time yesterday is thinking about how do I notice my own toxicity, my assumptions, the knower trap, when I'm in blame mode, the victim trap, right? When I'm stuck in a sucker's choice, how do I notice that and deal with it myself before I do the language stuff, which is why I do the thinking stuff before we do the language stuff. Because otherwise the language just becomes pretty words, right? And people can kind of tell, right? So I want to show you, we talked about Viktor Frankl yesterday, and you get to meet him today. I had Viktor Frankl on video. In the video quality is a little rough, but the audio is quite clear. So in what he's saying is the trick to getting out of the quadrilemma. But again, it's like yesterday, you're going to have to listen behind the words. So here's Viktor Frankl talking about this.
They wish to make a lot of money. In Europe, every American student.
So how does that relate to your left-hand column, what he was talking about? Your left-hand column conversation.
I think it's the ability to kind of reframe and apply some empathy, knowing that they're also having the left-hand column process happening, and that they're probably, when you're having a difficult conversation, that probably means that there's something going on the other side as well. It's often not one-sided, that like showing that sort of empathy and support will lead to possibly a better outcome, I think.
Yeah, I think the left-hand column, the way, one tends to think within the left-hand column, it sort of implies that the person you're speaking to doesn't have potential or something greater at their core. And so if you were to speak from the left-hand column, you wouldn't invest in that potential or manifest that, like help manifest it. So when you're speaking in the right-hand column, you're creating that spark or helping find that spark that he was speaking about.
Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, it felt like maybe you mentioned the bubbles in the soda. I was thinking maybe that's the crosswind, is these feelings you can't help that of frustration and toxicity are coming up. And so it's that overcorrecting which can help sort of negate some of the feelings you have, so that when that person senses how you are, they're not sensing your own toxicity.
So when you think think about the moment of your left-hand column conversation, in that moment, how would you describe the other person? What words would you use? Be honest.
So I was thinking territorial, stubborn, yeah, throwing up walls, sort of being someone who blocks progress.
Okay. So, Chris and Rachel, how in that moment, what words would you use to describe how, in that moment, how you were thinking of that person?
I think territorial is another word, the same word I would use in that moment. Maybe subordinate.
Okay. So,
I would also say territorial and kind of overreaching.
If I think of this person as I enter in the conversation as, oh, they're going to be territorial, what do they give me?
Territorial.
Yeah. So in a sense, we said people sense, and as humans, we're actually quite physical in relationships. This is one of the weird things about Zoom, right? When you're in the room with someone, one of the things we know is that people sense how we think they're going to be because we signal to them by our posture, our breathing, everything, by the way we start a conversation. And what's funny is that we can, so here's how to think. When you meet a person, they're in a quantum state, meaning they're a cloud of possibilities. We talked about yesterday, we have shadow values, we have aspirational values, and as humans, we're complex, right? In the moment of the conversation starts, that cloud of possibilities resolves to the person who you're going to get in that moment. Now, what we know is one of the main determinants of who that person will be is how you think of them. So if I anticipate you being defensive, I'm going to engage with you as if you're defensive, which means I'm going to elicit your defensiveness. Now, some people say, well, so you should always assume the best, right? You should assume the best about others. What do you think? Assume good intent. Now, I'm tricking you here because assumptions are which of the traps?
Knowing?
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of assumptions, actually. So I'm a little bit weird in my field because I actually disagree with assuming good intent. What if they have shitty intent? Right? Because then if I assume good intent and they don't have it, now I really hate them, right? I gave you the benefit of the doubt, blah, 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 blah. So, but what can we assume? We can assume that there is good sides to this person because they're probably not totally evil, right?
They're trying their best.
We can say, well, look, they're complex and they probably have better sides and they probably have worse sides. So which do I want? So I would say assume they have a better and treat them as if they are in that place. And what we know in the research is I treat you as if you're going to be more open in things. I will elicit that side of you. So research on this. There's two big studies on this. The first one was done with school children, and there was recently an article written. This was done back in the 70s for the first time. The title of the article is "Why Can't We Learn from This Study?" It's been repeated like 1,000 times. You always get the same results. So you take a group of school kids, you test them for ability, you divide them into equal groups by their testing, okay? Equal groups by ability. You assign each a teacher. You lie to the teachers. Teacher one, you say, you got the good kids. You're so lucky. You're going to love them. They're going to be so easy. Teacher B, we say, you got the slow kids. They're not bad kids, but they're slow. You're going to have to work hard. They can be a little unruly. Now you turn the teachers loose with these two kids, these two groups. Now the groups were tested equal ability. You test them a week later and a month later. Guess what happens? They perform to the expectation of the teacher. And consistently, over and over and over. The study's been done and repeated in all kinds of variations and always works out the same. The mental model of the teacher creates the behavior of the students. And the students have the potential for both. Right? Now, does this work with adults? Harvard University was finding that people came out of Harvard Business School were having very different career trajectories, even though they did the same in business school, which means we can assume they have similar abilities, right? So they started finding pairs where they did the same in school, but their careers, one went up and one went down, and they started doing root cause analysis, right? Doing interviews and all this stuff. They found out a number of factors. One overriding factor that they kept finding, any guess? What was the overriding factor? Relationship with their first supervisor, and not only the relationship, but the first impression had by their first supervisor. And it didn't matter why they had that impression. If the person, happened to look like someone they liked when they were a kid, and they had a positive first impression, or it was sunny that day, and they had a positive first impression, didn't move up. If they had a bad impression for whatever reason, they were having a crummy day, or they didn't like the tie they were wearing, spiral down, because that first supervisor starts from the first impression, and then when they pass them on to the next person, they pass on that impression. Oh, this person's going to be good. So what we can say then is that this is the ideal, like dealing with me first. How do I engage that person? In the sense, do I treat them as if they have a better side and that I can elicit it, or do I treat them as if they're going to be defensive and I elicit that? See what I mean? So this is what I say we have to deal with ourselves, not them. In a sense, we said the best way to do is to be. I have to deal with my mental models, right? The way I'm thinking. Am I in the traps making assumptions and things like this, right? So going back into the content a little bit here. Another way to say this, there's another philosopher